All right.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Hear us out. Hear us out. I want to say thank you to all who have subscribed to our channel, who have been listening, leaving comments and concerns and questions. And
Mm-hmm.
we thank you for all of those. And we thank you for continuing to hear us out.
To hear
I'm,
ourselves. Yep.
I'm Renee.
I am Kyrie, and this is a
Situation.
continuation
Mm-hmm.
of the of the
Conversation
uh,
from last.
from last episode,
Mm-hmm.
finishing off our discussion on culture
Mm-hmm.
and just that. But I will say that a lot has happened in the intervening week
Yes, a lot
in
has.
between. So
Mhm.
it's like uh,
I don't know. It just seems as if we're moving in. I don't even know if we even know where we're going. We're just in the.
it's just madness right now.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you just in the thick of it, things are
Mm-hmm.
happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like
I don't know
how many
because.
times
Yeah.
how many times do do we have to continue to play this game?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it 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 hurts so much to see because it's like we know
Mm-hmm.
we know that all of this is going to amount to just another one.
Yes.
Like all of it won't be enough. And after everything that is going on and that
Mm-hmm.
will continue to go on, you know, it won't amount to the types of things that you're looking for. And it's like, well, you can do these simple things that actually don't require, you know, you know, things like this.
Mm-hmm.
You can build infrastructure. It's small things. You can
Mm-hmm.
build infrastructure. You can, try to create, these little pockets in your community. Something that can't be, you know, taken down all at once, and something that isn't contingent on a building.
Mm-hmm.
It's a more of a mentality and
Mm-hmm.
understanding, stuff like that. Like you can do just these small things can lead to true shifts in the
Mm-hmm.
system. And at that point, the system would change, but you would have shown that you won't need it anymore
Right.
because you would have been able to implement your own and do something for yourself. But
This
it's
is
just
this is madness and laziness and reverting back to these old tactics.
mhm.
And it's frustrating. And I think we talked about it one time before, the feeling of hopelessness and futility. And it's because there hasn't been truly that shift, in perspective. I mean, we think that we know more, with the access of having Google and internet, those type of things. But I find that's not necessarily the case. We haven't really, learned from history, or we keep coming to the same conclusions, even though we say that we're operating in truth now. So I
Well,
don't I don't see how we're come
operating from a greater basis of knowledge. I don't
right,
think
but that yeah,
anyone's really
operate
operating
from a
from
basis of truth.
from a basis of truth.
So we're caught up in this.
Hmm.
And I keep saying, I use the word retreat. No one wants to take a step back, because taking a step back means, for so many of us, that to take a step back means that you're conquering, or that you're you're failing in some type of way.
Hmm.
And that's that's not the case. You step back so that you can regroup, so that you can get some sort of clarity. But that's not what
That's
that's
not
not.
that's not the response
No.
that is going on. And so,
No.
I guess it's been quite a week
Mm-hmm.
just looking at the stuff and all you can do is take a breath and just be, oh, oh, all
Another
right,
one, another one, another one. Right.
another one, another one, another one. How are we going? How is this? How do we make this? How can we rectify
Mm-hmm.
this? How
Mm-hmm.
can we possibly get to a place where, at least for us, we can actually begin to do something constructive? And
Mm-hmm.
we've had that conversation a million billion times,
Mm-hmm.
but I just wanted to address that
Yeah.
we
Yeah, we
we
are quite
we have taken
cognizant
note
of. Yeah, we're
of,
quite
you know,
cognizant
of
of what's going
all
on.
these things that
Right.
are happening, of all these things.
Hmm.
But it is also important that we continue to have our conversation that is trying to analyze and address the greater context in which these things are happening. And if you're asking, why is it, you know, then I will say that our conversations on culture
Right.
and history and human nature and all these things, I think illuminate,
Hmm.
the answers to those questions that we are acting in our best possible judgment.
Hmm.
And that to do the things that we are talking about is contrary to the pattern, to the norm,
Hmm.
and that it's harder to do because it just does not seem like a viable answer
Right.
to most, or that it's not. I mean, we look at what's going on here and we say that that's not enough. But when people, that's one of the biggest responses that we get to what we're trying to say is that
Hmm.
that's not enough.
Right.
That it needs to be this giant, unilateral thing, and that if it's not that, then you aren't doing the work,
Hmm.
But all I can say is that is that
The thinking is the same, therefore the behavior is the same. It may look different because of the times that we're in. Of course,
mhm,
this is 2020, so it doesn't look like 1920. Those type of things. But when you get to the root of it, it's really the same type of thing. And the reason why we're at this moment again is because there has not been, a shift in how people think. So they revert back to, you know, what they've always been doing. And the thing is that we have not always been thinking. Thinking is an action, is an action as well. And we have not put forth, you know, I think the kind of effort that we need to put forth in order to change what's happening. We don't it's much easier for us to keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's much harder to have a shift in perspective. It's much more difficult to take a step back, to really analyze, to not blame. It's harder to do those things, and so everyone is resorting back to the lazy. It's easier to go out there and just create mayhem, to travel from one state to another
mhm.
and talk about you're protecting property, but end up murdering people in the process. And people,
Those things mutually
yeah,
uh, aren't mutually exclusive.
right. So,
They kind of entail one another.
yeah. And so, because it's the thing that,
It's how our world works.
yeah, it's the thing that it's reliable. We keep doing it because it's reliable. I find that when you're talking about shifting how you think, that requires a lot more confidence on you, the individual, on us as a collective. It requires a lot of confidence. And what I'm seeing is that we lack that confidence,
Well,
so
what I
this
will
is where
say
we are.
is that just a summation is
Hmm.
that we are we are acting in our best knowledge, and
We're acting
this
in the
is
knowledge that we know. I don't know if it's necessarily the best.
okay.
Hmm.
That we are acting. I can't say that things are the same, but they're not necessarily different either.
Yes.
It's
Hmm.
it's been, like I said, a shift in form, but not in function. But
Right.
it all just amounts to the same thing.
Right.
And all I would say is that on people from both sides of this conversation, if
Right.
in
Hmm.
quotations, whatever this is devolved into,
Hmm.
whatever this is, just be prepared to not get what you're looking for.
Hmm.
Be prepared for you to go out in anger and do something in anger or in a righteous fury or whatever, and just end up with more anger and
Hmm.
more righteousness. Just just be prepared to walk away empty-handed, because if this is if this is the knowledge, if this is what we have amounted to,
Mm-hmm.
if this is where our knowledge brings us, if this is the path that we have chosen to walk, then I think we as a people must be resigned to the idea that there will be no constructive perspective shift.
Mm-hmm.
There will be no change.
Mm-hmm.
And all we will ever do will be more of the same. And it's, and talking about culture, we look at the legacy of these ideas and exactly the genesis of them and where they come from. And like we said many times, that throughout all of human history, throughout the history of society in itself, it's always been this question.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been, how can we make it work for everyone? And there's just some people who aren't looking to make it work for everyone, who are just trying to make it better for them.
Mm-hmm.
you know and this like I said, this isn't anything new. This is the battle that we have been fighting practically ever since we decided to live together,
Mm-hmm.
ever since society's been created, and it's always amounted to this. So maybe that is just that's just our lot in life.
Mm-hmm.
This futility, this constant reaching, this constant you know arguing, this ebb and flow, this rise and fall. And it's like, maybe things don't fall the way that they used to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the world is a lot more connected. Societies just don't up and disappear anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it's gonna fall
Yes,
nonetheless.
right.
And if you're working towards perpetuity, if you're trying to create something that can last, but you're doing it this way, then you're not trying to create something that can
Mm-hmm.
last. If you're fighting for democracy, but you're doing it this way, then you're not fighting for democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you want it so bad, but you know the way that you want it, which kind of precludes any idea of change in
Mm-hmm.
itself, because you think because you're trying to spell out the words, with the only letters that we have,
Mm-hmm.
you know, while we're saying we need to expand our vocabulary a bit, you know, but you just be ready.
Mm-hmm.
Just be ready to walk away empty-handed, because you went out there with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You went out there with nothing. Just be ready to walk away with
Mm-hmm.
just the same, because obviously, it it just takes too much. It takes too much
Mm-hmm.
from us to actually take a breath. It hurts too much.
Mm-hmm.
The world is just too real, in a sense. Lives are at stake. People have died. People are dying.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's a bit naive from us
Mm-hmm.
to think that this is the type of climate for people to gain some type of awareness, some type
Mm-hmm.
of cultural perspective. But this is the time. This is the time where we
Mm-hmm.
most desperately need
Mm-hmm.
that type of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And if you spend the rest of your time not looking for it, but
Mm-hmm.
just living,
Mm-hmm.
surviving,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll never be able to get it.
Right. And there was this young lady, she's from Georgia, and she mentioned how she was involved in the protesting
Mhm.
in Georgia. And she said, how she would go out there and it's hot, and, people will be calling her, pejoratives and racial slurs for 3 and 4 hours that, she's out there,
Mhm.
protesting. And she's like, you know what? I've had enough of that. This is not working. So she turned away from that, and she started. It's a nonprofit, and they also have, I guess, branches in Atlanta. In Austin and some other places as well, where it's with the refrigerators and the food bank
Mhm.
type thing, and she's setting up these different little small food banks with the refrigerators in a lot of the what they call like food desert areas. I guess like in the Atlanta metropolitan area. I'm not particularly sure of the area, and that was just her small thing. She said, that's how she decided to step away. There are people out here who are, you know, don't have enough to eat, those type of things. And versus me being out here protesting, holding signs in the heat and being called racial slurs, I'm just gonna walk away from that. So that was the thing that she, decided to do. And I'm like, where with everything that's going on, there's so much need,
Mm.
you know, and I'm not saying that you don't need to be heard, that you don't need those things. I'm not saying that.
Hmm.
But your voice, your creativity, even your anger, and it can be channeled differently if you just take a moment to just take a step back. Just step back and just try to find that clarity like this young lady did in Georgia. And it's it's harder to do that sometimes because it feels as if you're not doing anything,
Hmm.
and then come to realize, her stepping away and doing something that seems so minor, so small, has had you know greater impact. So that's what I'm hinting at.
And it's not just about walking away. It's about
Yes,
walking towards something,
right, right,
whatever that may be.
right. And so when our conversation today that we're going to continue with culture,
Hmm.
you know, and to try to have that shift, you know, we're asked, this is what we've been doing. It's the tradition, okay?
Hmm.
And try to break away. It's breaking away from tradition means that doesn't mean that you're failing or that you're a coward. And why should I run? And and it's even trying to have a shift in perspective, even in that type of thinking. So
So yeah,
hopefully we can
it
we can
has
get
it
through
all
that.
starts somewhere.
Yes,
So
yes,
and we've for us, like all of our conversations are just trying to retrace the path that we took.
mm-hmm,
You know,
mm-hmm,
to to get to the places that we've gotten.
mm-hmm.
Not like we have all the answers. So
Right,
we've made it to the promised land or
right.
anything, but we know what we aren't,
Yes,
and we know where we're going as well.
mm-hmm,
We know
mm-hmm.
what we're trying to achieve.
Right,
But that's like that. The hardest thing about what we're doing is that we can't do it.
right, right,
What we want can't be created by in this language.
right.
And just going out and do it or
Mm-hmm.
creating some giant protests or whatever.
Right.
It's entirely in the hands of everyone else.
Yes, correct.
So it's like if everyone just does a little,
Mm-hmm.
just gains just a bit of perspective to understand the things that they shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
doing, then that'll be a greater basis for anything,
Mm-hmm.
for all of the stuff that we're trying to do. So,
Right.
that puts us in a much more, I would say, desperate situation
Yeah.
because, you know, we always come back like to what can we do? What
Right.
can I do? What
Mm-hmm.
can I do? And the answer always comes back to nothing. Because it's not about us. It's
Right.
not about what I
I
can
can
do.
do
It's
right.
about what we collectively as a
Mm-hmm.
people, as a
Yes.
collection
Right.
can do,
Mm-hmm.
and at that point, like it's not about buildings. It's not about that.
Mm-hmm.
That comes after the fact. That
Right.
comes, as a consequence of,
Right.
of this,
Mm-hmm.
but like I said, so we feel this a lot more
Mm-hmm.
because it like our power is directly hinge to your power.
Right.
What we can do is, entirely dependent on, well, how are the people, what are we saying?
Right.
Who are we?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we go about, you know, our cultures and our
Mm-hmm.
shift and our struggles and stuff like that. You know, it's entirely contingent upon that. And if
Mm-hmm.
the people don't move, if the people don't have a shift in their perspective,
Right.
then there is really nothing we can do.
Right.
Nothing we can do. So that's why we are here every week
Mm-hmm.
trying desperately to give to those same 13 people who listen to every episode,
Or the 25
trying
who have subscribed so far.
yeah
Yeah.
trying to give to them
Mm-hmm.
just 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 enough
Mm-hmm.
so they can do it themselves,
Right.
because that's where it becomes autonomous. That's when
Right.
it becomes culture,
Right.
when it becomes what you
You
do,
do. Right.
you know and it's so easy for us to forget that our society is just us,
Mm-hmm.
that our systems are just
Right.
us. We try to correct the system
Right.
without any knowledge
Yeah, because
of that
because
it's us.
right, because when we say, change the culture, change the system,
Hmm.
you know, you're talking what you are saying is change the people, change the thinking.
Change
This
the
is
people, change the
yes,
people.
right.
You know,
The system doesn't operate
independent of us.
right. It is the system was created by people. Okay, culture is
System
created
is,
people. Right, culture was created by people.
and if
So
and so,
mhm.
like I said, we are in a much much more desperate situation
Yeah,
than than a lot. Look, I don't want to say that our pain is more than the pain of than anyone else. That's
no,
not what I'm trying to
no,
say. I'm just
no.
saying that what we can do is directly related to what you let us.
Yes.
And if you aren't letting us,
Hmm.
if you aren't, giving us that, and the only way you could give us that is by us giving you that.
Right. And look, I understand that.
So if it's not that, then it'll always be
Right.
this.
And I understand that, you know, a lot of these things that we're talking about, it sounds foreign almost. But the thing is that the things that we are saying is not. Look, I always now I'm referring back to Amilcar Cabral again, and his shift in perspective and how he thought and the things that he was able to do to lead two different nations, you know, in their struggle for sovereignty and for independence. You know, there had to be a shift in thinking, but he did it with the knowledge that, he knew that it was much harder to do that,
Mhm.
you know. And so I think that's how, we are approaching this as well. And just like Amir Raw, we you know we sort of know that it's you know I can't lead you to it. It's not me,
Mhm.
Renee the individual. You know, it's it's the work of each and every one of us
Mhm.
to get us
Doing those
there.
things
Hmm.
that we can do.
Right. And again, when you talk about shifting that perspective, we're talking to to folk who have been trained, or you could say indoctrinated in a particular mindset for
Well,
years, and so now you're trying to shake some of that, and so that's a lot more. It's a lot more involved,
mhm.
particularly when you're dealing with folk who are older, who are more set in their ways. So this is where we are, and you have folk, like the young man, the thug from Illinois who went to Wisconsin. He's 17 years old. Imagine what was drilled in his head from the time that he was a child, like a little baby. You understand what I'm saying? To where,
For a 17-year-old kid
yes, for him to
to end up killing two people.
Yeah.
And,
right,
it's like I said, it's this spiral, just this
yes,
tailspin, and it's like, we often say that I think, I've said this before, that evil is a reaction. You know that everything is as evil as you make it out to be. You know, and if we want things to shift, to change, and stuff like that, then it's about controlling how we see the world, and not allowing ourselves to be pushed in any particular direction. We need to stop reacting. We need to stop.
Yeah.
We need to stop. Things are going to continue to get worse.
Yes.
Things are going to. It is going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yes.
And that's all it's ever going to be. This isn't constructive.
Right.
It's only going to get worse.
Right.
It's going to get worse, and then you're going to walk away with nothing. And then at some different point, it's going to happen again. It's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, because things can always get worse.
That's right.
That's
right.
If history has shown us anything,
right,
is that it can get worse. Don't get hung up on Trump is another Hitler. Trump could be worse than Hitler.
Correct.
Or Mussolini,
right,
or Stalin, or any one of these fascist dictators.
Right.
We use history and our culture and our tradition to recognize what is happening around us.
Right.
But don't allow that to constrain your view of the possibilities.
Correct.
We are on this path, and it's like at every single moment, like that's the thing is that I don't want to spend too much time on this,
right,
but it's just you are never not in control.
Correct.
At any point, literally at any point, it cannot be this anymore.
Yeah.
Us, black people, we can shift how we respond to the situation. We can do something else.
Correct.
We can do something else. And it's like, we don't have the power to do that, but it's like, yes, we do.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
What they do, how they respond, is entirely contingent on how we respond.
Right.
You think they would be out there if we weren't out there? This 17-year-old boy, you think he would have went out there if we weren't responding this way? I'm not saying that it's our fault. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm just saying that, no, it's entirely his fault. He chose to do that. Right? He chose to do that. But we need to see how our choices, like I said, we all live in the consequences of each other's decisions. Nothing ever happens in a vacuum. And nothing ever comes of itself. If we want things to change, if we want things, to not be this way anymore, then we have the power at every instant, to change that and to act like that and to create something different, to do something different. But it's just, we forget, or we don't attribute ourselves that much control in our world. That when you're fighting from underneath, it seems like you don't have anything.
That's right.
But those people who are over you, they are fighting from underneath as well. And all that power that they have is the power that you give them. It's the power that you continue to give to them every time you continue to do things this way. If you want to take power back, then you need to respond differently.
Right. But the thing is that we look at power as this.
In the most tangible sense, and,
Right.
in the armies, the
Right.
guns, and stuff
Right.
like that.
Because they have the guns. Like, they are
But
the
that's
ones who, listen to me,
yeah.
just hear me out. They
I
are the ones who have agitated
yeah.
the
Like I said,
situation. You understand me?
we've had
Right.
this conversation.
Right.
We talked about
hmm
war. We talked about all of that.
Right.
So
So now it's
it's just about
we
us
have to respond.
understanding
Right. We have to
that
respond differently.
this is never outside of our control, and if we
Right.
want something different, we need to do something different.
Right.
There are always going to be
hmm
some crazy guy with a gun.
hmm
That's always going to be there if we continue to do things this way
hmm
on both ends.
Right.
We need to change how we're having this conversation.
Right.
We need to.
Right.
And you can say, well, they're not going to change the conversation. Look,
That has nothing to do with us,
if
right?
we change how the conversation is had, then the
Right.
conversation changes.
Changes.
Period.
Point blank.
In a discussion.
Right.
So like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on
Right.
this. I just want to take some time and say that
Yes, we understand what's going on. We recognize
live in
what's
the
going on.
world.
Yes.
we
We are
see
not
these
absent from it.
things,
Right.
And it's having an effect on us as
Mhm.
much as it has an effect on you. We're angry, we're tired. We want something to be done.
hmm
But we also want something that will last.
hmm
It's something that actually means more than comfort.
Right.
Than just, being comfortable in a broken system.
Right.
We want true rectification.
Right.
That's
And
what
I
we
don't
want.
think at any point in time that we've actually ever been comfortable in this anyway. So, let's get to where we actually can be, because we haven't been.
So
yeah.
All right.
So let's
Let's finally begin.
let us work with our definition.
Let's finally continue our conversation on culture. We've alluded to it. Just a brief review, because culture, like we said, we're looking at the pattern of people or what people do, the particular form, that we are serving, that we are creating, that we operate in. And we've talked about, the things that we get, or, how is it that we profit from our culture, how they profit from their culture, and how it always, the aesthetic may be different, but, it's pretty much the same thing.
Right.
But since we're under theirs, we attribute to them, and since they're over us, they attribute to us those types of mentalities. But none of that is actually an accurate picture.
Right.
And it's too simplistic. And if you want to actually begin to shift the conversation and change the culture, like I said, if you want to change the function, then you must become formless in a sense. You change the function. You change the function by understanding that it's an individual thing, and that our culture leads us to addressing the group. This group and all these things, but the group is just people. And if you want things to shift, you have to do it by addressing the people,
right?
Every person, and I think we concluded on, it's not about resisting patterns, because patterns is just what people do,
right?
But it's about recognizing those particular patterns,
right?
And when we are feeding into the more negative and toxic aspects of our society and the things that we do, and being able to correct for that,
right?
And that's most easily done when, like I said, when you become formless. It's a culture of culturelessness,
right?
Like how I said, a form of formlessness, but the function is always the same, and living together,
right?
Prospering together. So all right, let's continue our evaluation. Let's see if we can create more, make that idea, the idea of formlessness a bit more dynamic, by once again going to the our definition of culture here in the Old English book we got here, dictionary we got
right.
I'll say old because this thing is
8.
But
It
yes.
works. It works. Keep going.
So this is the fourth definition for culture in this book. We went over 2 and 3,
Right.
and in
We
this
say,
episode
yeah, we're going to
we're
do
gonna do
four and
four
hopefully
and
maybe
rope
loop
around
back
back
to
to
one.
one. So the fourth definition they have in this book is culture. The act of developing the social, moral, and intellectual faculties through education.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads into this question, the question that we asked: how do we teach our culture?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the how is how are we and how should we?
Mm-hmm.
Both of those are kind of encompassed in that question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask you. Number one, how are we teaching our culture?
How are we doing it?
How are we doing it?
Right now, we're teaching it from an approach of outside.
Yeah.
Everything is this outline, curriculum driven, textbooky. This is what it is because it's so.
That's what it says.
Yeah, and then you're going to take a test and get a good grade and move on, and so it's much more. I'll say inhumane because it doesn't really require, anything, from you to do something like that, to just push curriculum, to push, state exams, those type of things.
Yeah.
It's in and out. There's really no thought, involved in that. That's how it's being done. You can look. I passed my state exams. I have a state, approved, high school diploma. So I am, qualified, in that particular thing. So it's not really
once
requiring
again,
anything from you.
it's form over function. Once
correct.
again, it's putting the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
That we teach through trying to get the A.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Trying to get that thing that looks like you understand instead of actually trying to get people to understand.
Mm-hmm.
We teach by passing tests and doing stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to reach people where they are, and teaching them where they are in a much more, like you said, in a much more humane way. Where it's a bit more dynamic, and it's a bit more flexible, and you're not holding people to these stringent, what are these? What's a good word for it? These stringent goals.
Mm-hmm.
These things that these goalposts that just say, if you can't reach this, then you don't know.
Right.
If you can't reach this, you don't pass. You get held back. Stuff like that. And that's how our system works. Our educating system works, and that's how it is. And how should it be? How should we go about teaching our culture? Because I think the way that we operate is how we teach that culture. There is reason why these things are so insidious, because they find themselves. We confront them and we deal with them in so many different forms, and that form of you got to get the A, you got to pass the test, you got to do this, you got to show it. You got to show that you know it. Showing that you know it is a lot more important than actually understanding it and knowing it for yourself.
Right.
Because there's no test that can actually test the individual.
Right.
That's much more, that takes a lot more insight on the hand of the educators. But that form in itself is how we teach our culture. That of you got to get to the goalpost. You got to you got to pass the test. You have to, like, it's form over function. It's the aesthetic. That's why, like, once again, one of the many reasons why we're so obsessed with it. Because everything that we do has always been about, show. Show. The tell is relative. If we also, the show don't tell, but it's just showing. There's no telling. There's no being able to put it in your own words, being able to understand it the way that you would, or being able to lend the type of education that you're getting, to be able to understand your circumstance, to
Mhm.
be able to understand, where you are and how to best address your situation.
Right. And so, how should we?
How should we? I guess we've already answered it.
Well, that as well.
Mhm.
But I find that if you do not genuinely love, you know, the people, you can't teach. You can't instruct.
Mm.
You can't be an educator. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, because education is discovery. It's enlightenment.
Hmm.
It's allowing growth. It allows for challenges. And as much as I have told
Hmm.
my children,
Yeah.
you all are familiar with the word no, much
Yeah.
more than the word yes, by the way, is that the approach is to allow you to see, allow for you to have your vision
Mm.
without me telling you that's not what it
Yeah.
is. It's whenever we arrived at a particular impasse.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, okay, well, let's see.
Hmm.
Let's see how this goes. And as an educator, you go in with the knowledge that you don't know everything.
Mm.
There are things that you do know.
Mm.
And you stick to those. I'm not saying you stick
Yeah.
to those principles, okay? But at the same time, you're learning as well.
Yeah. So it's not that you don't know anything.
Right.
It's that you don't know everything.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so you are instructing from that framework
Mhm.
that it is
It's
It's-
letting them develop their own vision of something without
Right.
telling them what they need to see.
see correct. And that's the thing you can't test.
Yeah.
You can't put an A or a B. You can't assign a grade to that.
Mhm.
And as you are educating, you are developing a relationship. This is why even when I was in quote unquote, regular schools, I've always wanted a class that I could keep,
Hmm.
4 years in. 'Cause I taught high school.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted, whatever class I have for the ninth grade, I would love to keep that at least that one class all
All the way,
4 years. And I'm like, if I ever get the opportunity to do that, y'all in some trouble out here.
Mhm.
Y'all in some trouble out here. And so I've never gotten the opportunity to really ever teach, a one class,
Yeah.
4 years.
Mhm.
I've never been given that. And so a lot of teachers,
Mhm.
they don't mind the influx of new bodies,
Yeah.
in and out because of how things have been presented to them, how they have to instruct.
Yeah.
But for me, I've always wanted if I could just keep one group,
Mhm.
the whole time. So with homeschooling,
Mhm.
well, I was able to do that.
Yeah.
And we took a more, open enlightenment portfolio kind of approach.
Mhm.
And so you do that, knowing that it's not restrictive. You
Yeah.
can't you can't you can't approach it from fear.
Mm.
Okay? Because I know like in our homeschooling, I mean,
Nothing was off top.
nothing was off the table.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, I felt like I needed to put it on the table. I decided to have put some things, hammered down and some
Mhm.
other things.
Yeah, I mean,
just place
not
it.
to say like, look, you got to know how to write,
Right.
right? You got to know how to present your ideas.
Right.
You got to know like that. There isn't a lot of room for discussion in math and
Yes.
science,
Right. Those
like
type of
that.
things. Right.
Not really in how to do it, in
Right.
the actual process of,
Right.
if you're you
Yeah.
know,
Those
trying
type
to
of things.
solve a
Right.
problem or trying to write a sentence,
Right.
then you have to know
Yeah, particular
where to
standard
put
is
the
involved. Right.
nouns and subjects
Right.
and
Yeah, that's
adverbs and all that
I'm
stuff. You
not
got to know how to
talking
do
about
that.
that.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm
That
not talking about that.
so then like that when you put, it was that. It
Yeah,
was teaching
we definitely had
how
that.
to do that stuff,
Yes.
how
Yes.
to how to actually do it, but the content of those
hmm
ideas. It was never about you know trying to get me to fit a particular mold or
hmm
trying to get me to see things. It was more about just developing what was already there.
Right. And so it's almost an approach. I remember when I saw this clip by Dr. Amos Wilson,
Mm.
and he talked about how, when we do our instructions and teach or whatever, that we shouldn't do it from I'm gonna say, a dogmatic type of approach.
Mhm.
That, there's nothing wrong with, reading or learning from, different folk from outside of our group.
Mhm.
And because there are things that you can learn, from that. It doesn't take away from you,
Mhm.
the individual, if you were to read something by a white author or whatever the case
Mhm.
may be. And listening to this, I felt a sense of, well, I already knew what I was doing anyway. I knew that I was right,
Mhm.
in that approach. But to hear him, say it, I felt
Yeah, because
even more
a
validated.
lot of us like we shy away
hmm
from like actually reading like white authors,
Right.
stuff
Because
like that.
understand, this is, when you're in an Afrocentric, setting, right?
Hmm.
And when you're coming from the approach that, what, in regular school, they teach all the white stuff. And so, I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna come back. And
Hmm.
so your
The opposite, like you said.
yes,
Mhm.
quote unquote, right? And
Yeah.
so what happens is that in your American public school system, right?
Yeah.
You look at teaching and it's weaponized against us,
Yeah.
right? It, they don't teach us about our culture, those type of things. So it's weaponized against us. So, we only learn Christopher Columbus, or we only learn Amerigo Vespucius, or whatever. We only
Yeah.
learn that. We don't learn about, us and our other side. So when we decide, okay, we're going to have our own school, right?
Hmm.
So, we're not going to teach, you know, um, Shakespeare.
Hmm.
We're going to teach Claude McKay.
Hmm.
And I've actually used Claude McKay, by the way,
Yeah.
to teach sonnets and different things of that nature. But I don't use it as a form of a weapon
Hmm.
to teach. It's the same thing even in my approach when I did incorporate, white authors
Hmm.
into some of our classes, that it was just trying to take a more just to understand, and understand, and I think it really opened up a lot of things for you,
Hmm.
and how we approach things. And it's not, I wasn't ever afraid of that moment.
Hmm.
I wasn't afraid of it, because I'm confident in me. I'm assured in me. So my learning, about, a Shakespeare or a Tim O'Brien or any one of these people,
Hmm.
it didn't devalue a Claude McKay at all.
Hmm.
That wasn't my approach.
Yeah.
Because
But
because I love
yeah, but like you
I
said,
love my
with,
people.
with the
So
idea of opposite,
right.
right? Because this is
Yeah, I
say
talk
that you
about the
say a
opposite
lot
all the
is
time,
that
right?
like we think the opposite of a beauty pageant, whether the white person wins all the time, and is that we create our own beauty pageant
hmm
where the blackest person
Right.
wins all the time, and it's
And
like
I'm like, the opposite
the
is
opposite is not to do that
at all.
at all.
Right. And so that was
So the idea
hmm
is that if regular schools,
hmm
regular Eurocentric schools
hmm
are weaponizing or aren't teaching us as a people.
right.
It's kind of just teaching us as fixtures, a part
Right.
of their story,
Stories, correct.
right? Instead of actually teaching us about our story.
hmm
If if regular school doesn't give us that, and
Mm-hmm.
cuts us out of the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then in our schools,
Right.
we're going to cut them out of the conversation, and just
Right.
and they're going to be taught as just fixtures, a part of our history,
Right.
right? Like I said, that's not the opposite.
Correct.
The opposite of that would be not teaching us as a people,
Mm-hmm.
right? But also teaching them as a people,
Mm-hmm.
teaching history, as like it's
Like
ours.
as people were involved in it, because a
Yeah.
lot of times, you know, and understand, I'm coming from a place of love here. I love my people, and I want us. I want us to win. I want this to be over, and I want us to win.
Hmm.
Okay, and I understand what has happened to us.
Hmm.
I understand,
What is happening to
what
us?
is happening to us, and I hate it.
Hmm.
I hate it for us. I hate what has happened to us. I even hate how, we have been subjugated by these people. Hate it. I hate it. It drives me insane. Okay? So what is it that I can do for us? And I work from the premise that I love us. And so I know that we can't continue to operate this way. We cannot lie. And for me, I can't lie to my students. I cannot lie to my children.
But that's the thing.
And so
Not necessarily seeing it as lying.
I know, because but I understand that again. You've been smacked around, kicked around, and told you can't be here, and those type of things. And so when you do your own thing, that's right. Stay out, keep out, whatever the case may be. And we're going to draw this hard line in the sand because guess what? We didn't even draw the line. You all did. And so, we have heroes too. We have explorers. We have mathematicians. We have philosophers, artists. We have all of these things. And we're great. Look at it. Boom. We're the best of the best too. You understand me? And so we use that as a confidence builder.
Hmm.
You understand? Because we've been told, all our lives that basically that we ain't shit, and we come from a place that ain't shit, and so you need to be grateful to be here in the great America, Christian country, or whatever, to take you out the jungles or whatever the case may be. So that's the thing that's been drilled in us, and so when you are operating the lie, basically, you want to combat that. You wanted to say, look, we have great people. Boom, here we go. We weren't just what you all said that we were. We're not just that, and here we are. And we're going to put that out there.
I will say that I've never been taught that.
Well, I know. But I'm just saying.
Well, I'm saying like I mean I can understand like from someone who grew up schooling in like the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and people who grew up schooling in like the 60s and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. That that the
Right.
conversation may have been, it may have been taught that way.
Mm-hmm.
I remember learning about you know the civil rights movement
Mm-hmm.
in like seventh grade and stuff like that. But
Well, I
it,
know,
but
but I know you did some stuff even
yeah, like
earlier in
even
fourth
before that,
grade,
it's yeah,
third grade, and
for
stuff
third
like
stuff
that.
like that. But I mean, I remember because by my seventh grade history teacher
Mm-hmm.
was a white lady,
Right. That was,
right? That was at
yeah.
15, McDonald 15,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a white lady. And I remember learning about these things, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember the conversations that we had. It was never taught to me like the way it was taught like to y'all,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense. It was never like, oh, we only amount to this
Mm-hmm.
and we aren't a part of, or that we don't
Mm-hmm.
belong, or that we should be grateful to be here
Mm.
because of stuff.
Well,
It
let
was
me put
never
it this
it
way,
was never
and
taught to me
I,
like
I
that.
would say this much is that New Orleans is peculiar.
Hmm.
you know, I went to Catholic school when I was younger. And I will say that it wasn't necessarily taught to me that way either.
Hmm.
Okay. I don't know, we have a different kind of history.
Hmm.
And so I've come to realize that, that Louisiana and New Orleans in particular, like how, we did things is not necessarily how it happened, outside of New Orleans or outside of Louisiana.
Hmm.
So so I'm having this conversation in the general, but for me in particular, oh no, I've always learned about, Miss Dupree was my third grade teacher,
Hmm.
and I remember doing, like all year round actually, like
Hmm.
Black history stuff, learn about Thurgood Marshall
Yeah.
and people, just that type of stuff.
Yeah.
We've always done that. And, you know, slavery was that part of history. It was just, yeah, that it
Yeah.
happened,
But
but
it was never taught
it
to
was
me as a
never
defeat.
right. Correct. It was never that. It was just it was more of a continuation of a story. You
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying? It was never taught that way. However, for others, because when I talk about like my personal, how I was taught,
Hmm.
and then I listened to folk, they were taught like,
Hmm.
you know,
Because I mean, like I said, like you said,
totally
New
different.
Orleans is a peculiar place because we
Yeah,
got things like like Congo Square
yeah, and
and stuff.
we have
You know,
cemeteries,
yeah,
and we know
yeah.
that,
I'm just saying,
right?
like for those who don't know like, about Congo Square and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Congo Square was the place where the slaves would meet
Yep,
and stuff on
that's
Sundays
right.
because we got Sundays off.
Yep, and if you were white, you
Because
better not have been
yeah,
nowhere in
you
the
are.
area.
Hmm.
I mean, nowhere,
That's what
like
I'm saying.
nowhere in the
That
area,
like,
right?
and you got Sunday off
Mm-hmm.
because you were
Yeah,
standing
because we have a
down and
particular, yeah, because we have a
you,
particular
you
type
were
of
fighting,
relationship.
you were fighting,
Yes,
doing all types of
we
stuff
lived in very close
that they
proximities
gave.
with these
I
people,
know. I'm just
right?
saying is that
So yeah.
I'm just saying is that I think we have like in New Orleans in particular, you kind of have to have a different relationship with
Mm-hmm.
that type of history because the history wasn't we just came over here
And y'all
and that
just,
was it.
yeah,
It was
no,
always like it was always taught to
cantankerous.
us as like you said, it was fighting in Africa, it
Mm-hmm.
was fighting on the boats, it was
Right,
fighting in the islands, and it was
fighting
fighting
in the war, yeah, yeah,
in the city.
right.
It was never taught to us as that, and I always think that well, why? But why is it that? Why is it that? Like for me, still then that it didn't. I still felt marginalized
Mm-hmm.
in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. I didn't really see it as like my history,
Mm-hmm.
or I didn't really feel like I was a part of the conversation. Why? Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
If it was never taught to me as if as y'all were in the jungle and then
Mm-hmm.
y'all got caught over here and we
Mm-hmm.
taught y'all how to wear pants, I
Well,
guess,
I
and
guess
stuff.
whatever,
It was
right?
never taught to me that way,
Mm-hmm.
but I still didn't feel like I was a part of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
always think that it was because like history history wasn't taught to me as if it was mine,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Like I said, it was taught to me, or at least I don't want to say that like it wasn't intentional. I think this is just a failing of how teaching works in
Mm-hmm.
in the American school system altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it wasn't. I felt like I was a part of their story,
Mm-hmm.
and that the civil rights movement and that the Black Power movement and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't taught to me as something as us.
Mm-hmm.
As the Black
Mm-hmm.
history or the
Mm-hmm.
thing, and for
Mm-hmm.
us as a people, it was always taught to me as just a part of the greater
Right. American
American
story.
history.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I felt like I was a part of their story.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't really being taught to me as if it was my
Mm-hmm.
story.
Right.
And when we started
Homeschooling.
homeschooling, and
Mm-hmm.
when we looked at and when we were, we read world history, American history, and stuff like that, it
Mm-hmm.
was always taught from the books weren't written from our perspective, but it
Right.
was always taught from our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So we take this larger conversation, right? This larger um, uh, perspective in a sense
Mm-hmm.
on. what exactly was going on in America
Mm-hmm.
or in European history and stuff like that. And we always think it was always written like an actual history book,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we talked about it,
Mm-hmm.
when we went through it, it was
Mm-hmm.
always from our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how I began to build a relationship with history
Right.
and particularly our history.
Mm-hmm.
And we read about we read books from different African leaders and stuff like that. We read about African history in
Mm-hmm.
general and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it's always, and I think that that really that is when you know I started to see it as like my story,
Yeah.
as
Well, I
our
started there
story.
first.
Is that because yeah, that's what
Start
I'm
there
saying is
first.
that I think that's just
Mm-hmm.
a failing of how
Mm-hmm.
because like it was just me and you,
Right.
and it was a conversation really between us,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't really have that
Mm-hmm.
type of conversation, you know.
You can't do that type of individualized,
Yeah, in
instruction
that
and
great
learning
setting
in a classroom. Yeah.
to
Right.
where a
Mm-hmm.
person can begin to feel like they have some type of agency,
Right.
in their
Mm-hmm.
own.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. It's hard to get to that
Mm-hmm.
because it's not about that. It's
Right.
about passing the test, about getting the grade,
Right.
and having just some cursory knowledge
Mm-hmm.
of the history or
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you learned about
Yeah.
it.
Right.
You're not really building a relationship
Right.
with it. You're not really feeling connected to
Right.
it. You're just learning about
Right. And like I said, for me, and I know that Carter G. Woodson spoke about this as well,
it. Mm-hmm.
is that you have to love your people to embark on something like this. Because so much of it, and he wrote in the 30s, the 20s and 30s and think, 30s, that time frame.
I got the book right
And the
there.
book right here, yeah, you can see when when it was published, okay?
Yeah.
Is that, when you are not operating from a place of love,
1933.
Okay, when you're not operating from a place of love, it's you can't allow for the kind of growth that you will see from young people.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is that if it doesn't sound the way that you want it to sound, if it doesn't follow that particular take the form, correct,
mm-hmm.
that you want it to take, then something is quote unquote wrong.
Yeah.
And so you have to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, if you love your people, then you wouldn't do that. You can challenge it. I'm not saying not to challenge, because we've gone back and forth for hours just talking about
that's kind of what the show is.
And so that's when you have to allow for that.
Yeah.
And you allow for that without feeling like it's a threat
or that
to
it's
you.
undermining.
Yeah.
The historical
Right.
context.
Right. It's all a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's all a part of it, that means that it is that's what it is, because it's all a part of it. You can't teach, your people from a point of denial, from a point of lying. Because when you do that, this is what happens every single time you do that. When you teach from a hard line, from that dogmatic type of approach,
mm-hmm.
and young people, they step out in the world. And they will.
And they find out.
And they find out it's not what you said.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that hard line. It is these nuances and these type of things. Then they're
looking at you.
They're looking at you. Like you lied to them.
Mm-hmm.
Black is all outdoors. Red, black, and green flag everywhere. All your books. All your African wares. Or whatever the case may be. You taught them from a particular, from what I call that dogmatic type of approach.
Mm-hmm.
And they step out in the world and realize that's not
the case.
That's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
That there is some, like I said, some nuances, some things that's not as cut and dry as you make it out to be. So what do you do then?
So if the question is, how are we teaching our culture?
Mm-hmm.
We're teaching it dogmatically.
Mm-hmm.
We're teaching it from a very particular view,
Mm-hmm.
so it can take a very in a very particular form.
Right.
And it often fails because when it's time for a student to refer
Mm-hmm.
to that knowledge, they find out that it's not complete, or that
Right.
it's not enough,
Mm-hmm.
or that they feel cheated and are lied to.
Right.
Because they weren't taught the true complexities
Right.
of their history, or they don't feel like they have any agency
Mm-hmm.
or any stake in it.
Right.
Because they haven't developed a personal relationship to it.
If we're talking about problem solving here, right? This is problem solving.
If we're talking about how we should
Right.
teach it,
Right.
you have to teach it from a basis of love,
Mm-hmm.
you've alluded to many times,
Right.
but a basis of that questioning our particular view of history,
Mm-hmm.
and discussing our particular view of history doesn't weaken it.
Right.
It's not hindering it.
Mm-hmm.
It's strengthening it,
Right.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that having those conversations,
Mm-hmm.
those arguments, if you would, going back and forth, is allowing for the idea to develop
Mm-hmm.
in them,
Right.
for them,
Right.
to have an individual relationship with it. So if when it is time for them to refer to that knowledge,
all right. So
when
here,
it is time for them to,
right. So here is
to
where we
build
are in
upon
history
that,
right now.
they
right?
have something
Right.
that they can, that they have something. They are ready to deal with the complexities
Right.
of the situation. They don't feel cheated,
Right.
or lied to.
Right. And so here we are at this moment, right? And I'm just going to put the proverbial thought out there, so just hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That the European line of instruction and teach, it's a lie. It's wrong. It's wrong. I'm just going to put that out, right? And so then you have, our line of teaching, right? That we're telling the truth. We're operating from the truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if the line has led us to this,
Mm-hmm.
and all of your truth telling
Mm-hmm.
has led us to the exact same point, then what's the point? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
number one. And well, why is it that we have to learn the truth then? If we're arriving, if it all amounts to the exact same thing, right? So if you're, now I'm talking about us now. I'm kicking
Mm-hmm.
from the curb now. If you're teaching, your instruction, what you think is your enlightenment,
Mm-hmm.
is leading your people to the exact same point that the quote unquote the liars or whatever is, then who needs, something has to change here. Something is wrong
Mm-hmm.
here. And since I'm only talking about us, something is wrong with us here.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've actually looked at it that way. Because our...
I guess another question would be, if lying leads them there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And if your truth leads them there,
Uh-huh.
are you actually telling the truth?
Right. Are they really lying?
So, yeah.
You understand me? So that's the basis that,
That's why it always falls apart in the end.
yes. So this is why for me, it's I look at it as love, problem solving,
Mm.
And the problem is to lead us away from this.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think we should be doing. When you're teaching from love,
Mm-hmm.
you want to lead us out of this.
Yeah.
And so, I challenge all of us. It's an individual thing. I challenge all of us, to teach from a point to where we're not coming to this.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you tell me that this is what it just has to come
That's
to,
a lie.
then you close your doors now.
Mm-hmm.
You can let the lions operate then.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even need to. You don't need to. You don't even need to be operated, because if this is what it's going to come to.
Yeah, what it all leads to.
Right. If it's all leads to this anyway. So
then why have the burden of history and
Yeah.
knowledge and all this stuff?
right. If this is just it.
Yeah.
So again, it's a shift in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing that is not the way to go. And if we say that's not the way to go, then damn it, that's not the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So no, you can't teach, your history as a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
You have to teach it as a healer,
As a tool.
as a tool. And, if other folks benefit from that, good. They should.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know what their weaponized history has done.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, and what it is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry that, you feel like, well, the burden is always on us. It's not that, look,
That's not a burden.
that's not a burden though. Look, it's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you're telling me that these people have, they have created a history, they have created, that's just lies and just, just reaching. Okay, you can't do that either.
Mm-hmm.
And think that you're doing something different just because,
Well, that was your lies.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, your truth.
Yeah, that's not how this goes. Because again, if you're, operating from truth,
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to lead you out of this, not lead you to the exact same point that the liar,
Mm-hmm. That the lies lead.
Right. Something is wrong. Something has to give. So that's where, that was my approach day one. And
so if like I said, the two questions being,
mm-hmm.
how are we and how should we?
Right.
How are we is that we are teaching it we are trying to weaponize our history against them the way that their history has been weaponized against us.
Yes.
Yet it all amounts to the same thing.
Yes.
That how should we be doing is that instead of weaponizing it, we should be utilizing it.
Right.
Utilizing it
to get us out of this.
To a different place, to a different conclusion,
That's right.
to a different result.
Right. You can't have. How are you having the same conclusions as the people who you say hate you?
Mm-hmm.
How? So that actually goes all the way back to our conversation on Afrocentricity when we talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's
more than a response.
Yes, it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
Afrocentricity can't be just a constant response to combating Eurocentricity. We're not here on planet Earth to constantly combat and to respond to you all
mm-hmm.
in the manner in which has been transpired.
Mm-hmm.
That's not no. At least I don't want that to be our life because I don't think it is. So it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to respond from a point of healing, of coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And that has not been the case. And look, I know where that comes from. And so, again, a shift in perspective, it needs to occur. If you want to save your people, you say you love your people,
mm-hmm.
don't allow them to walk down the exact same path, under the umbrella of that's just what it is.
Well, it's our umbrella.
Yeah. Versus under the red, white, blue umbrella with stars on it.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna do it under the
red, black, and green.
The red, black, and green, and and we're gonna just take the two umbrellas and just smash at each other or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
No.
So yeah. So that leads us back to our very first question,
Okay.
right? The very first definition. If if the entirety of every of because of the entire discussion from our last episode from this episode, I think it all amounts to do different do different things to get to a different place.
Yes.
Change how you see things, change how you create things, change how you teach things, change how you think about things,
Right.
change those things so you can get to another place. Because if you continue to allow our profit to be the struggle, right? If you continue to allow our, creation to be the aesthetic,
Right.
if you continue to try to weaponize our history, if you continue to do those things, then it's going to lead us to the exact same position. Because when all the things that we've just said about, profiting from struggle, prioritizing, formal function, weaponizing our history. Does it sound like I'm talking about black people?
Right.
No, it
No, it
sounds
sounds
like
like
I'm describing, white people.
That's right.
Like that. But
I'm talking
like you
about us,
said,
right?
I'm talking about us.
Right.
And you thinking that, well, if you rebrand it, if we're doing it, it's going to get us somewhere different. No, it's going, like you said, it's going to take different thinking. It's going to take retreating or a shift of perspective. It's going to take those things to get us to a different position. To a different result.
Right.
So now let's talk about the totality. The one big umbrella definition that encompasses all these things. So I think that'd be the perfect way to to summarize the entire thing. All right. The very first definition we have here: the totality of socially transmitted behavior patterns, arts, beliefs, institutions, and all other products of human work and thought characteristic of a community or population. Like we said, we've talked about the particulars of those things. Well, let's talk about that one big thing. It is everything that is indicative of a particular people or population, community or population, right? So now, so the question is, much like in our conversation about faith, what is the role? What is the purpose these things are supposed to serve? Our culture is supposed to serve. What is it serving, and what is it supposed to serve?
Culture is supposed to serve you. You are the culture.
Yeah.
Culture does not exist outside of you. It's impossible.
Is that how it works?
That's not how it works. So what we have here is what we have created. We don't like what we have created. We can create something else.
But that requires, like I said, different thinking, different, intentions altogether.
Yeah. You are not a prisoner of culture. You are constantly, well, you should be. Constantly creating that culture to help you, to sustain each and every one of us. And that culture is not stagnant. We're not a stagnant people. I get that, yes, we've been here a long time. I'm not saying that. We're not a stagnant people. And so our culture should reflect that. And I know that, that sounds scary to a lot of people, because this is what it is and this is what it's been and that's what it's always going to be. No. We were once in change.
Well, that's the thing.
That's like I said,
it's always going to be that if you continue to operate.
Right.
You're feeding into
it. Right.
Much like we talked about with society and systems, that the system is the people.
Right.
And if you're trying to change the system, then you're not really addressing the issue.
Right. And it
Because
has to.
the system is just the people,
Right.
but you're prioritizing the institutions,
Right.
right, over the people who create them,
Right.
right? And like the same thing with culture
Mm-hmm.
is that the culture is just the people.
Right.
If you're trying to weaponize our culture, trying to change our culture,
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to do that, then you can't address the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because the culture is just the people.
Right. It doesn't
And if
have to
you
be
want to,
this.
yeah,
If we say this is look, it doesn't have to be this. So let's not operate
yeah,
like it has to be
so like I
this.
said, it always comes back to that.
Mm-hmm.
It always comes back to the system, the
Mm-hmm.
people, the society, the people.
Right.
The culture, the people.
And look,
It
I've
always comes
asked.
back down to those things that the generalizations that we make
Right.
about our world,
Mm-hmm.
and the things that help us to
Mm-hmm.
generalize,
Right.
like systems, culture, stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Those things, we think that those things lend themselves toward absolutes,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing. You can't generalize and think that that's going to lead you to something
Right.
absolute.
The
Because
generalizations
when
has
you are
actually.
generalizing, you are in itself, you are in the very nature of generalizing is working out or excluding the exceptions,
Right. And so
excluding those things.
the thing is
So
that generalizations has hampered our progress. That's what it has done. Okay, they have generalized about us.
Mhm.
And in response, we have generalized about them.
Mhm.
And so this is where we are. And like I always would think, well, you go first.
Mhm.
That you go first thing because this is what you all have done, right? And so
but like
so
the
now,
things that make it easy,
yes, that's what
right?
generalizations do.
The
Yes.
things that make it easy to
Mm-hmm.
generalize, like I said, it's the adherence to structure,
Mm-hmm.
and you want a concrete structure, so
Mm-hmm.
you try to find those absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why white people can only be this, and
Mm-hmm.
black people can only be that,
Mm-hmm.
or and the system can only be this.
Mm-hmm.
It has been, it will be, all that stuff. It
Mm-hmm.
can only be so much.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to generalize,
Mm-hmm.
and also trying to find an absolute.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, those two things. Well, if you're generalizing, you're never going to get to anything absolute about our world.
Right.
And I know that seems counterintuitive because something that is absolute ought to exist
Right.
everywhere.
Where?
That's what makes it absolute,
Right.
right? But I don't see it that way.
Right.
Because, well, something that is absolute, right? It exists everywhere.
Mm.
But generalizing does not give you an accurate sense of everywhere.
Right.
You are constraining then reality down to your particular view instead of addressing it as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you want to find an absolute, if you want to operate in absolutes, if you want to find like an absolute evil, absolute good, true right, true wrong, if you want to find those things, you're not going to find it through generalizing.
Right.
The only place where absolutes actually exist is on the individual level, on a case-by-case basis. For someone, if you are right here, right, if that one person, and you are trying to address what that one person has done, is doing, and will continue to do, if you are trying to address that person, right, then there are things that person is doing that is absolutely wrong. That is absolutely right. Right? There are, there are things that person is contributing to that is absolutely evil and absolutely good. But those absolutes and with those actions, right, that are contributing to that changes when you talk about the next person,
right,
and then the next person, and the next person.
Right.
The goals are still the same.
Right.
The absolutes are still the same.
Right.
But if you were to just say, well, now you're talking about a group of people, and then they do this and they do that, and they're feeding it to this and they're feeding it to that. Now you're resisting the complexity of the situation,
Right.
because there's always going to be people in those particular groups that aren't
Right.
that.
And we should be more than familiar with that.
Yeah.
More than familiar. I mean, the hoodie, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hoodie.
Yeah.
You know, not every young black man that wears a hoodie is a thug.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know what that type of thinking leads to.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. Okay, you know, not how many times have we have said that?
Mm-hmm.
Not every black man that you encounter is a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you responding that way? Why are you calling the police on me when I'm, I don't know, moving into my apartment?
Yeah.
Moving into the apartment, not moving out,
Mm-hmm.
moving in. You know, or if I'm walking my dog. Oh, you know what? I'm just walking.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting, whatever. Oh, you look suspicious. What the hell? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
What is a look suspicious? You fit the description. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, we turn that.
Yeah.
You know, you fit the description. You know.
Of the oppressor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know. So, we know
Mm-hmm.
what that means. We know that. And so, it's, again, when you're talking about trying to have a shift of perspective, right? It's easy to rely on those type of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder, you know, to deal with folk, you know, individually. Because we've always
won't be able to get it that way.
Yeah.
You won't be able to truly define your reality,
Mm-hmm.
or see a people,
Right.
you know, or, you know, recognize a culture,
Mm-hmm.
by looking at the group.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I said, the group doesn't exist. The group is a figment of our imagination.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what we call people.
Right.
Right. But we would rather address that,
Mm-hmm.
instead of actually addressing the people,
Mm-hmm.
the one place,
Right.
where you can actually find and understand those absolutes.
Right. We've been victimized by that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the victimize, at least I would recommend that we don't victimize. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that we do the same things that they do,
Mm-hmm.
because it leads us, you know, right where, you know, we are, the same place that we say that we don't want to be.
I think that we're starting to realize that this isn't a white or black problem. This is a people problem.
Mm-hmm.
All people generalize. So
Yes.
stereotypes,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone does that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thing that people do,
Right.
you know, to understand our work.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to understand our work,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to get to those things that you're looking for, then you can't do that.
Right.
Right? So
You can't generalize the people.
you can't generalize anything.
I'm just saying.
You know, so in conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
Cultures, history, all those things are meant to simplify our world and our worldview,
Mm-hmm.
our view of other people and our view of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're meant to make it easier for us to recognize ourselves, to
Mhm.
recognize humanity.
Mhm.
You know, but they end up having the opposite result.
Mhm.
They end up obfuscating, you know, humanity and obfuscating other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it easier for us not to recognize other people as a people.
Mhm.
You know, for us to cast them, you know, as fixtures in our minds and our history, instead of
Mhm.
seeing them for who they are
Mhm.
and understanding them from theirs.
Mhm.
Right? So, and if we want, like you said, if you want something different, if you want something else, then we have to be wary of those things that end up just propagating and creating more of the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's up to those who know.
Yes.
You want to operate from a place of knowing,
Mm-hmm.
of knowledge and understanding and wisdom. For those people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you want something else, then you have to do something else. And
Mm-hmm.
you have to be about developing a culture
Right.
of something
Something else.
else
Right.
that is able to recognize, the humanity
Mm-hmm.
in every situation, in all peoples. Like I always said, there are no monsters in the real world. There
Mm-hmm.
are no heroes, there are no villains.
Mm-hmm.
It's just people,
People.
and that it, some people may think that that takes away from our world,
Right.
right? Or that it is not allowing us to actually call the things that are happening. It's not allowing us to recognize evil or
Mm-hmm.
recognize good
Mm-hmm.
if we can't cast them in those lights. But I would say that if you're trying to cast them in that light, then you're not trying to recognize it.
Right.
You're trying to constrain it.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to make it, understandable to you
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to understand the idea or the person,
Mm-hmm.
as they are.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding is like it's what you do.
Right.
It's not incumbent upon that thing you're trying to
Stand.
understand
Correct.
to be, to
Yes.
if you want to understand, you have to do all the work.
Yes.
You are the one who have to take those steps, who
Mm-hmm.
have to take, have to, push, the envelope and push yourself
Mm-hmm.
out of your comfort zone because you're the one trying to understand.
Right.
And if you want understanding, then you have to reach them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand it from their perspective. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to understand that there are no monsters.
Right.
That there are no heroes, there are no
Mm-hmm.
villains. It's people.
Mm-hmm.
People doing what they know best.
Mm-hmm.
People trying their best to be a person.
Mm-hmm.
And once you begin to see that, then the luster begins to fade. The luster begins to fade because then you start to understand that, it's the system, that black people doing this won't make it any better.
Right.
That if it's broken under them, then it's going to be broken under us.
Yes.
Because
and we definitely know that.
Yeah,
Yes, we know that. Yes.
Because the distinction begins to fade, and we
Mm-hmm.
start to see that we are as capable of this evil as they are.
Mm-hmm.
That we are as unable to recognize the absences, the gaps in our logic as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And once you begin to see that, a clearer picture begins to arise of the situation that we are in.
Mm-hmm.
That is not about defeating, not about beating, not about destroying or avoiding or hampering, or
Mm-hmm.
it's about moving, shifting, changing, and you have to constantly do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to create things that are indicative of us, that allow us to constantly move, constantly shift, and constantly change.
Yes.
So yeah.
Very good.
Very good.
All right. So hear us out.
Mm-hmm.
Comments,
Any questions,
concerns.
comments, concerns, anything?
Yeah, just leave it in the comments and
Mm-hmm.
have a great day, people.
Have a great day.